Thank you, sir. Moving on, item 3, Title 6 Policy and Meeting Procedures. CYMPO complies with the Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and related non-discrimination statutes and regulations in all programs and activities. Members of the public may review the CYMPO Title 6 plan and submit a self-identification survey by accessing the CYMPO website. A reminder to those attending the meeting, please keep your line on mute until you wish to speak. This meeting is also available for public viewing on the CYMPO YouTube page. So at this time, we have called the public. Is there anyone out there? Vinny, I don't know. I came on a little late. I didn't know if you saw anyone that was interested, but this is an opportunity to hear from the public for unscheduled comments.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I just wanted to let you know today is our first effort and attempt to do Zoom webinar. The whole purpose of that is exactly with what the chair just announced, the call to the public. We wanted to give the public an opportunity to be fully engaged in these meetings. And through the virtual means, Zoom webinar now allows for that. What we had previously is we had a deadline for public comments to come in prior to the meeting. At this time, there are 7 attendees outside of the executive board, the TAC and CYMPO staff that are currently, if you will, live in this particular meeting. Any one of those attendees in this call to the public are able to do that. What you would do is on the Zoom feature, you would raise your hand, and then Allison or Daniel would unmute you, and then you would be able to speak in that call to the public or any other action items where the chair calls for a call to the public. Mr. Chair, at this time, we haven't received any indication that anyone does want to speak, but thank you for letting me explain that a little bit further as to what's happening today.
Yeah, thanks, Vinny. I think it's important. We have a call to the public. It just gives our citizens the opportunity to hear to say what's going on. I think that's a valuable resource we get to hear being on the CYMPO board. So with that being said, we'll move on to item 5, consideration and possible action to approve the March 17th, 2021 Executive Board regular meeting minutes. We'll need a motion on that.
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Clerk, all in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Say nay. Allison, you get all that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on, item 6, CYMPO Administrator Report. Vinny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I have a bullet point list here so I wouldn't lose track of anything. Typically, I don't list it out that much, but there's quite a few activities happening for CYMPO related things. I have been invited on behalf of CYMPO to be participating with the North Prescott area planning efforts that the city of Prescott is currently doing. There's only been, I believe, one stakeholder meeting that I may have missed prior to my invitation. If any of you are not familiar with this effort, this is the city of Prescott is evaluating and looking at the land use all around the airport. Where this really relates, and I'm grateful for the invitation, is there are some studies that we currently are looking at updating. One of them is the Great Western, which would basically connect the town of Chino Valley with the town of Prescott Valley, and it would border this study area. So we've been able to share with the city of Prescott and their consultants the work that we're doing. I think it's really good communication. Again, very grateful to Councilman Good and the city of Prescott for getting CYMPO involved and at the table. It's very valuable to have those communications open. The other thing is very similar to it. Yavapai County is launching or is moving forward with their comprehensive plan. And I have been extended an invitation, or CYMPO has been extended an invitation, and I will be participating on the committee. I believe that Supervisor Brown and the Board of Supervisors just made a motion for me to be able to serve on that committee to represent CYMPO and to be able to have that voice at the table along with other stakeholders. So I'll keep you in the loop on that. That process should take well over the next year. The North Prescott area study should wrap up here, I believe, within the next 9 months, as I understand it. Highway Safety Improvement Program. CYMPO is going to move forward with a consultant that we're bringing on board to help us out. The Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP, is a way for us to bring in additional dollars to our region, specifically for safety projects. This is a program, they haven't made the announcement. This will be for fiscal year 25 and 26. The announcement will come from ADOT July the 1st. Our work in the month of May and June, though, will be in preparation for that call for projects. In years past, ADOT's announced anywhere from 75 to 90 million additional dollars available to the state of Arizona in those particular years. The projects that are awarded are, again, safety projects. They really come down to the benefit cost ratio where there are crashes and fatalities. So the consultant is going to do two primary functions with CYMPO staff, the TAC, and ultimately the executive board. They will look at the crash data from the last 5 years. And as they look at the crash data, they'll work with us to begin to identify possible projects that might prevent future crashes and fatalities. But it is based on historical data. So we will be looking at historical data. The second part of their role will be to help us write the applications, the applications for this particular funding. We're proud to announce that we will be working with Greenlight Traffic Engineering and their project manager. His name is Mike Blankenship. I've had the privilege of working with Mike the last few years at Lake Havasu MPO, and we have been successful each of the years that we worked with him, on average, to bring an additional $1 million into the region for safety projects. So Mike and his team will be working with your TAC representatives at their May and June meetings to begin to identify projects. So again, on that, stay tuned. I'm really looking forward to bringing in some additional funds to the region. State Route 89 to 89A on-ramps alternative selections report. Staff is currently working with the TAC to develop a scope of work to study that intersection, specifically the on-ramps that would take you to the town of Prescott Valley. This has been identified as an issue and some real needed improvements for that on-ramps. So we are hoping to be able to issue out a request for quotes in about a month, which would be later in May, if not early June. And we'll bring someone on board to do an ASR for that on-ramps. And then finally, these last two items tied together. The transportation improvement program that we had tentatively scheduled. I've asked the TAC to go ahead and table the transportation improvement program, or the TIP. And the reason for that was a couple things. Number one, you have a new administrator, but then more than that, we have new executive board members, several new executive board members. And I thought, just as a side note, the TIP is the next 5 years of CYMPO funding and what our commitment is going to be. Well, we had a tentative TIP. I thought it would be really best if we could have a summer retreat for a few hours where we could all gather as CYMPO staff, the executive board, and the TAC to review that TIP a little bit more in depth than just a meeting. And if we were to focus in on that, it would allow everyone to be engaged in, again, really what we're making the commitment for the next 5 years. So we were planning on bringing that forward, but I thought it would be better to set aside some time. We are looking at July. We'll send out some calendar survey. I know everyone's schedules are busy, especially beginning part of July. I know there can be vacations and things. So the CYMPO retreat, though, will be able to address the transportation improvement program. With that said, those are my announcements. Maybe the last one is, today is Administrative Assistant Day. Just want to acknowledge Allison's work on behalf of CYMPO staff, the executive board, and the TAC. We really appreciate all of Allison's work that she does, and we honor her today and all of your administrative assistants. So with that said, Mr. Chair and board, I'll be happy to answer any questions or take comments from you all.
Thanks, Vinny. We have any questions for Vinny or comments? Seeing none, we can, oh, Phil, did you have something?
Chairman, I just wanted to thank Benny for prioritizing that 8989A on-ramp project and request for quotations. So I obviously made my comments at the last meeting, how important that is, and just want to acknowledge your acknowledgement of its importance. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and Member Good, thank you very much for acknowledging that. And we've been working with ADOT Finance to reconcile some financial things. So we do want to acknowledge their efforts to help us to be able to get that project out. So thank you for that compliment.
Vinny, I got a couple of questions I've got for you.
You bet.
Okay. First of all, going back to the Highway Safety Improvement Program, is it HISP or is it HSIP?
It's HSIP.
Okay, so it's Highway Safety Improvement Programs, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, those are the ones that we've been talking about for some years that I believe that ADOT and especially that our Alvin was able to get some money through in order to make those improvements on 89 north of Chino Valley. Now, I know that there's some other money out there because I asked Dan to submit a grant request for Dan. Well, I don't remember. Was it a federal program that we were looking at, Bob, trying to get money to do something out there? Get that to be a divided highway. We've got more than 4 deaths in the last 3 years.
Are you talking about on 89, Craig, or are you talking
89
about
north of Chino, right?
So you're correct that was funding that ADOT had sought out through this HSIP program and got that. I think it was awarded a couple years ago, but it's still a year or two out, I believe.
We ran short of a couple of different intersections, though.
Correct. That's correct.
So
I think around the same time we had applied for some HSIP funding and got it both for some on Cornville Road over in the Verde Valley, but also on Route 66 up at Fort Rock Road intersection. This would be west of Seligman that we've got on tap. It's a nice program. Typically, ADOT manages these programs. The federal funding comes in. The county works with ADOT contractor, which kind of administers the project, and then they select a design engineer, and then they bid it out and oversee construction as well. So there's a match component for the county when we've done this in the past, but it's been valuable. The project they're gearing up for design in later this calendar year and construction in 2022 calendar year is about a $4.2 million project that came in for Yavapai County for some safety improvements on Cornville Road. So it can be a significant grant opportunity, and I certainly support CYMPO trying to chase after some of this money if we have qualifying locations. Obviously, it's primarily dependent on past crash data with incapacitating or fatality type injuries.
yeah, I also wanted to make it clear that, that as far as the county goes, we've always supported that intersection at 89 and 89A, being widened. That's been something we've talked about now for 3 or 4 years at least.
Right.
And, it needs to be done, and it will help eliminate some of the traffic congestion and try and turn onto that particular on-ramp, and then people trying to get off of Larry Caldwell is a mess. So it can be really bad about 8:30 in the morning.
Mr. Chair and also Supervisor Brown, just on the HSIP program. So just a point of clarification that what CYMPO's role will be to do the crash data analysis. We're going to work with your TAC. The application CYMPO will prepare, but ultimately we will turn over those applications to whatever entity that falls within. So if it is within the jurisdiction of Yavapai County, we'll turn that application over to Dan and you, Supervisor Brown, that you'll be submitting it, but we're going to do all the footwork. We'll have you fully involved in it. As Dan said, there may be a match requirement on it, but that'll be discussed all prior to the application being submitted. What we try and do is get the projects 100% funded. If it's not 100% funded, there is a 5% match on it. But again, Dan will be fully involved in that process. And that also goes to each of the other people, each of the other members. So again, if it's in the city of Prescott, we'll be working with Ian. We'll turn that over to him for the Public Works Department, and Councilman Good will have input. So again, that's what CYMPO's role is going to be, is to chase these dollars, as Dan said. We feel pretty positive about it, but I do want to clarify that ultimately you as a entity of either the city or the county will be submitting the application, but we'll do all the work beforehand. The MPO will.
Very good.
Sounds good. Craig, do you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks, Cal.
All right, folks, we'll be moving on. If there's nothing else for Vinny, we'll move on to item 7. Consideration and possible action to select the secretary/treasurer of the executive board. Obviously, with the departure of Billy Orr, we have a vacancy. Her position was filled by Councilman Good, and looking for basically a motion to appoint someone. I don't know if there's been discussion on this or not, but I think naturally, if Phil's sitting in that chair, he might as well take on everything.
I'll second that motion.
Well, hold on a second. I just had a couple of questions.
No, there are no
According
questions
to
on
the
that.
bylaws,
Questions allowed.
Councilman, there is no questions when it comes to this. This is it. You're it.
You're it.
Go ahead, Phil.
hey, I'm here. You can't vote me in unless I'm absent. Okay.
The train is leaving the station.
According to the bylaws, this is done at the first meeting of the executive board in the year. So is that a calendar year or fiscal year?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, Member Good, it's typically at the beginning of the calendar year. We usually, the board is presented with this in November. The board takes action and it's effective for the January meeting is what has typically happened, unless there's a vacancy, as what was mentioned today.
So was Billy Orr elected to that position on January 20th at the first meeting?
Yes, sir.
But she resigned effective the 19th. So how could she be eligible to be voted in?
She was
voted
elected
in
prior. She was
November.
elected in. It was before that.
It was November. I think it was
Yes.
November's meeting.
Yeah, you're correct, Craig.
Okay, so that's when nominations are made and then they're elected on the
Then it
first
became
meeting of the year?
effective in January, because January was my first meeting as official chair.
Yeah. Yeah, because she announced her resignation on January 4th and was effective January 19th.
Yeah, Member Good. So yeah, it was this board discussed it in November of the previous calendar year, and then it was effective, as the mayor said, July 1st.
So if I were to be elected to that position, then I have to be prepared to present a financial report to the board the following year. Is that right?
Usually the financial report is done by, the general manager, which is Vinny, and they present that in November.
And Mr. Chair and members of the board and Councilman Good, yeah, just a clarification. And in the bylaws, what it would state is Councilman Good is correct if we did not have a fiscal agent agreement with Yavapai County. But to Supervisor Brown's point, because number one, you have an administrator and you have an agreement of fiscal services with Yavapai County, that presentation or that role would not be necessary. So Councilman Good, if for some reason we were to terminate that agreement, then the part of the bylaws that you referenced would absolutely kick in if we didn't have a fiscal agent, as we do with Yavapai County.
Well, as you know, we have an election coming up in the city. So by August 3rd, the rest of the board will know whether I will be continuing or not. So that might have an impact on how those financials are reported, because I would want to dig into them and have a good familiarity with them if I would be continuing that position.
Would you
So-
prefer then possibly have somebody else serve as secretary treasurer since you're in that election position?
Well, that's, I think it would be a concern for the board. Although, just like you and I, Craig, when we left Vietnam, we were winning at the time. So right now, during this campaign, I consider myself winning at the moment. But until August 3rd happens, we won't know for sure.
That's true.
So I think it's incumbent on the board to decide who they would like to have fill that position, to make sure that the financials are properly reviewed and available to be presented when they're required.
Councilman Good brings up a good point. I guess that's a decision for the rest of the board. If we make the motion to keep him for a minimum 4 months, or do we choose to pick someone who is not in an election year, who we will have all the way through January?
Well, maybe since there's a conflict, I'll withdraw my second so we can open us up to further discussion. Does John Hughes want to do it? He's the
Is
mayor.
John on?
I thought he was.
Yes, he is, sir.
Phone.
Yes, I am.
John, what are your
And
thoughts on that?
honestly, with the roles that I have right now, I would love to do it, but I honestly can't. I have more than 5 hats on right now, especially with the way the town's going at the moment.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry, guys, but any other time I would do it, but I'm very deep in work at town hall.
We're running out of options here, folks.
Yeah, the only other
Mr.
option
Chair,
is Tom
Mr. Chair,
Armstrong.
this is
Gary.
Board Member Knight. Did I misunderstand? Vinny, didn't Vinny say that the fiscal responsibility because of the agreement would actually fall on the county that's doing, Yavapai County that's doing it and not on this position?
I believe it actually falls on CYMPO to produce the documents to be reviewed by Yavapai County, I think is the way it actually worked.
Yeah, that is correct, Mr. Chair, members of the board and Member Knight. Exactly. In all honesty, up till the Secretary Treasurer position has not exercised a role in the history of CYMPO other than in title. And to a member's Knight's reemphasis, that's exactly it. The bylaws state that it would be my responsibility to present the financial statement, to have Yavapai County as our fiscal agent review that and attest to it, and then ultimately to present it to you as a board. So at this point, there has been no additional actions required of the Secretary Treasurer. So yes, Member Knight, you are correct. So if anyone takes it, I'm not aware of any additional responsibilities other than title. And if the chair and vice chair are absent, you would be third in line to run the meeting.
And I can,
Subject to that expected criteria, I'd be available to do that as long
Perfect.
as we can find Vinny a new office.
all right, so my motion for Phil Good to fill that position still stands.
And I second again.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
That's a yes, John?
Yes, that was yes.
Okay. It was unanimous.
And listen, if something happens, I don't mind taking the position in dire straits. I'm just sorry that I have a lot of things going on with what you guys all know.
No, John, totally understandable, and we appreciate that. So moving on, item 8, public hearing, call the public for comment on the draft fiscal year 2022 to 2023 Unified Planning Work Program. This is an opportunity for members of the public to discuss items of interest regarding the draft fiscal year 2022 and 2023 Unified Planning Work Program. So at this time, we'll open it up for a public hearing. Is there anyone or any of our attendees that wish to make comments at this time in references? And Vinny, you might be in a better position to determine Whether or not-
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We now have 11 attendees, which is great. We welcome all of our people observing and able to now better participate in the meeting. No one has indicated, but last call, if you will, anyone that would like to speak up, you can raise your hand virtually on the raise your hand symbol, or you could attempt to unmute yourself, even though I think Allison and Daniel need to do that. But you should be able to raise your hand. So I don't see any, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I don't see any at this point.
All right, with that being said, do you have
I
any?
do have a question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Reviewing that document, I know a lot of the expectations for the community's fiscal match are based upon the 2010 census numbers. So when we get the 2020 census numbers, will those percentages change?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Member Good, yes, we would update that. We would update it with the census, the division of the different member agencies that make up CYMPO. So yes, we would follow up with that when we receive the new census numbers.
Do you have any expectation when that might be?
Member Good, you might have more information than I do. It seems like that's been a pretty big stir up lately. If when the numbers are coming and kind of because of the pandemic, the impact of the numbers themselves. So I think I'm hearing what everyone else is hearing, and we're still kind of waiting to see what happens.
Vinny, we were advised just recently that we will have those numbers probably the last half of September.
Okay.
But we were advised as a town.
All right.
So
thank you, Mr.
again,
Chair. Good to have that information.
Who knows how accurate that is. So with that being said, we'll move on to item 11, ADOT Northwest District Report. Alvin?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Alvin unfortunately had a meeting in Phoenix to attend. He passed on his apologies. He had no updates, but we'll be sure to be at your next meeting to provide updates, but he's not present at this time.
All right, great, thank you. Item 12, Gary?
You're muted, Gary.
There we go. I'm sorry. The last transportation board meeting was Friday of last week. We're still in the public hearing portion for the 5-year plan, 2022, 2026, 2022, 2026. There was only one item on the agenda that was in Yavapai County. That was approved. The award was approved by the board. It was I-17 to Red Rock Vista on SR 179. Apparently that's the proposed work was on State Route 179 between milepost 299 and 304.4, approximately 1 mile south of Sedona. The work consists of a 1/2-inch mill, 3-inch asphaltic concrete overlay for the full width of the roadway, and a 1/2-inch asphaltic concrete friction course. Also includes replacing guardrail and guardrail end terminals and other related work. And that bid went to Sunland Asphalt and Construction, Inc. It came in at over the estimate by $86,141.95, which is only 2.1% above, which is not bad. But that's the only item on the only project on the agenda from last week that is in Yavapai County. And with that concludes my report.
All right, sir, thank you. Item 13, RTAC update. Kevin, I don't think Kevin's here, is he?
Yes, sir, he is.
Oh.
They're gonna unmute him, Mr. Chair, and he should
Excellent.
be able to give his update.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Kevin. It's all yours.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. So, lot to report on. There's a tremendous amount going on with legislation and transportation. Yesterday was the 100th day of the state legislative session, and they are on course as far as the regular session bills are concerned. Majority of the regular session bills, committees are done, and they're basically wrapping up the work of them on the floor. Several contentious issues that aren't near consensus, but also as far as the budget is concerned, that's a fairly non-transparent process. Typically, the House and Senate leadership enter negotiations with the governor, and when they have reached a consensus on what they want to see in the budget, and if they feel that or they're confident that they can get the adequate votes to pass it through the House and Senate, that's typically when the bills are drafted, and when it happens, it's typically a very quick process. And we know that they've been in negotiations for the last couple of weeks in earnest. Although with that said, we do know that it's also important to keep in mind that last part of the equation, getting enough votes from the rank and file members, that's a challenge because the two chambers are very evenly split on a partisan basis. So the Republicans control both the House and the Senate, but the Senate the split is 16-14, in the House it's 31-29. So those two majority caucuses don't have a single vote to spare. If they are unable to keep everybody in line, then they've got to talk about crossing the aisle, and then it gets really complicated and unpredictable. So it doesn't appear that they have everybody on board. There are a couple of members who've already expressed they're going to be holdouts if specific things aren't included. So it's very difficult to predict when they're going to be able to come to an agreement with the votes. But when it happens, as is usual, it'll probably move fairly quickly. From a revenue perspective, there were some extremely dire forecasts provided at the beginning of the pandemic. Those forecasts get updated periodically, roughly every quarter. And every time there's been an update, the forecast has been greatly improved. And yet the collections continue to way outperform even those improved forecasts. That's the situation that we are in. It's anticipated that we'll have more than a $2 billion carry forward balance this year. It appears that tax cuts are very much at the top of the priority for legislative leadership as well as the governor. It appears that the focal point of those tax cuts will be with the income tax. There's talk about phasing in a statewide flat income tax of 2.5%. There's some contention over what at least appears to be at this point some reluctance on leadership to hold cities and counties harmless from those tax cuts. Typically with shared revenues, there is an effort to try to hold the locals harmless if cuts are contemplated at the state level. So remains to be seen when all of that will be worked out. But after tax cuts, it appears that the next priority for that funding is the infrastructure. Leadership has indicated they're setting aside $200 million for projects to be earmarked across the state. That was very early on in session with the improved revenue outlook, and now with the very significant levels of federal relief funding that have come our way. I would not be surprised if that number, if that 200 million were to increase. And then, of course, with all of this funding that has become available right now, the top focus back in Washington is on a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure package, and it's got momentum. It appears, and I know much of it is not what you would consider to be traditional infrastructure, and the administration has already indicated that they expect that there will be compromise. There's been a lot of talk about having this done in two parts, where the first part would be the more traditional type infrastructure. The Senate Republicans plan on offering a counter proposal. We'll probably see the blueprint for that possibly by the end of the week, where they're talking about something in the 600 to 800 billion range that would purely be the transportation, with the potential for some other areas like broadband and water. And so it appears that there's a lot of momentum for the transportation side. The administration and the Democrats are indicating they've got this larger package that's out there, but if need be, they're willing to prioritize transportation. And over on the minority side, the Republicans have indicated that they support and are willing to move and will offer their own proposal as far as transportation. So it appears that there's a tremendous amount of potential for transportation revenue in the near future. What we don't know yet are quite the specifics as far as how all of it will work. We're going to see a lot of earmarks, both at the federal or state level, where you got to work with your congressional delegation or state legislators. Will it be competitive grants that you have to apply for, or will we see increases or new distributions of funding through formula? The likely scenario is that you're probably going to see some sort of combination of all of that. But my message to you would be looks like there's going to be a lot of revenue potential that will be making itself available in the very near future, and I'd be prepared to be proactive and pursue that. So again, tremendous amount going on, and happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to share something, that Kevin had mentioned, and it has to do with the state tax cuts. I hope everybody understands the state tax cuts, although they sound good, it's all coming out of revenue shared funding practically. And that would mean that we would not be receiving the amount of revenue we had received in the past. And therefore, that would put a burden on the cities, towns, and counties, possibly have to raise their individual property taxes if they have one, since they are not receiving the shared revenues they were before. Right, Kevin?
That's correct. In fact, I haven't seen the numbers for the counties, but I just saw a presentation by the league, and they indicated that the income tax cuts, the municipalities' shared revenue for income tax would be reduced by 24% if we went to the 2.5% flat tax or flat rate.
We're talking that for the county, it would be in the millions of dollars, obviously, because of shared revenue. And, so how do you make up several million dollars? The only thing you can do is raise your levy or raise your tax. So. One more thing, Kel, this has nothing to do with what Kevin was talking about, though. So I'll wait for a moment or two.
Okay.
Mr.
Kevin, you
Chair,
got something for us?
this is Board Member Knight.
Yes, sir.
And Craig is absolutely correct. This flat tax they're talking about for income tax will definitely impact negatively counties and cities. Also, I would like to add that the build grants, which used to be Tiger grants, have now been replaced with, let me find it, a raise. It's called a raise grant. And that stands for Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity.
Yeah.
Sounds like you know where that came from. But anyway,
Horse of a different color.
yeah. So now anyway, so and those, anybody that is applying for a raise grant, the deadline is, I think, July 12th. It's July something. I think it's July 12th.
Kevin, you have anything else?
That's it, Mr. Chair.
All right, appreciate that. Back to you, Craig. What you got?
Nothing. I had one thing, and I just wanted, I'm sure from all of us, we want to wish Allison a happy Administrative Assistant Day.
Yes, very much so. Allison, we
Yes.
appreciate everything you do.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're doing a great job.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
It's that loving smile that helps.
If there's nothing else for the good of the group, are we good? Move on to item 14, adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Hi.
Aye.
All right, folks. Hey, thanks for a good
Thank you,
meeting. You guys have a great day.
Y'all have a good afternoon.
Take care.